Hey book friends, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be chatting about what I read last month, so what I read in March. And I have a smaller stack than the last 2 months, but it is more of an average amount of reading for me. So let's hop in because I'm just excited to share these books with you. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome to the channel if you're new, or welcome back if you've been coming for a while. So like I said, this is my March wrap-up video, and I think I will talk about the books in the order I read them. And that's also the order of least to most favorite, so that works out. So let me start with the book that took me half the month to read. Half the month, you guys. And that book is this one. This is the new Sarah J. Maas book, and it's called The House of Sky and Breath, and it's the second book in the Crescent City series. And I read the first book, The House of Earth and Blood, back in January, and I just loved it. It surprised me. I just did not realize I was going to like it so much, and it was my first book of Sarah J. Maas's, and so I was just like, wow, maybe she's an author for me. Then I picked up this book. And I don't think I feel quite the same way anymore, although I'm not giving up on her. I'm still excited to try her other series, but this one just disappointed me, I guess is really the best way to put it. I still ended up giving it a 3-star. I mean, it might be more like a 2.75, and mostly that's probably because I was overhyped. I overhyped myself on this book. I thought I was just gonna love it because the first one I just loved. I loved how it ended. I was loving the characters, and then we get this one, and it's the same characters. It's the same characters, you guys, and I didn't like them as much. So the basic plot of this series, so basically the first book, is that there's this girl named Bryce who is a half fae, half human, living in Crescent City, where there's a lot of other different type of like magical creatures. So you have like werewolves, you have vampires, you have mermaids, angels, sprites, so many different things. And I liked that. And I'll talk about that in a second. And so she lives in Crescent City, and then there are these brutal murders that happen. And they are tied to her life. They're very personal to her. So then Micah, the archangel who's in charge of the whole city, asks her to help solve these murders or try and get to the bottom of them. And he gives her a helper in the form of the fallen angel Hunt, Athalar, to help her. And everything just kind of goes from there. And then there's this like budding romance between the two of them. There's lots of like tension in the first book. So that is how it is set up. So let me talk about my thoughts and feelings about this in a way that, one, doesn't give away the plot of the first, and two, is not spoilery. So I will try and be as specific as I can to nail down why I didn't love this book. So the first thing is the characters. So I loved Bryce and Hunt in the first book. I just really felt for both of their characters and their backstories and how they were kind of softening to each other. I loved that. Then you get to this book where it's like, now they're a couple, now they're a thing, and now I'm not interested. Like, I didn't like their romance from there. I didn't like any of the like sexy scenes. I did not like any of that. I felt like I didn't feel the chemistry between them like I did in the first book. And I don't know why that just kind of fell flat for me. But their characters, the two main characters, I started to kind of like roll my eyes at. Like, I was just tired of their scenes. I was tired of their decision making and her impulsiveness and him just going with it, and it just drove me nuts. But there are some like really cool characters in this book that I liked. I liked her brother. I liked the queen of the witches. I forget her name, but there were just a number of different characters I did really like, and I liked when the storyline came back to them. But the other thing is there was a lot more characters in this book. There's so many more characters, and I felt like I just wasn't connecting with very many of them. So that is my thoughts on the character work in here. As for like the world and the atmosphere, I did like that. I enjoyed learning a little bit more about it. I felt like the magic system, or kind of the different powers, I felt like I was mostly understanding and jiving with what was happening. There was some like magic stuff going on between Bryce and Hunt that I just felt was a little too, I don't know, convenient. Like, it was like, of course that went that way. So I didn't love that. But overall, I felt like the world was entertaining to be in, if you will. So then it gets to plot. So this is the next big part that I just couldn't handle in this book. It felt like the most disjointed plot I have read in a very long time. Like, where I'm just like getting tossed here and tossed there, and like, why do we even care about this? Why are we learning about this? And I wasn't sure if it was like this like second book in a series where suddenly you need to know a bunch of stuff, and that's how it felt like. It felt like the author was trying to like inform me of a bunch of stuff that was going to be relevant in maybe the third book or the fourth book or whatever. but I needed to know it now, but it didn't make sense. It felt like tossed in a very like abrupt way. Like it just maybe needed a little bit more editing is how this book felt. That's, like the plot was too disjointed. And it kept bringing me out of the story so that I was just like unsatisfied and I just never wanted to pick it up. And so it took me like 2 weeks to read this book. When the first book, it took me like 6 days or something like that. So yeah, I would say like the basic plot line in this book was a little bit different than the first one. It had a little bit more politics and a little bit more like resistance and the big bad people sort of plot lines, which was entertaining to an extent, but then it totally fell flat in a lot of other ways. And actually, after watching a number of other people's spoiler vlogs and like responses to this book, I think I understand a little bit of why it fell flat for me, because this is the first Sarah J. Maas series I have read. I have not read her other 2 major series, and then I found out that this book is trying to kind of link some of the worlds, or at least overlap some characters, but I didn't know, like I don't know those characters. So I'm not sure if like other Sarah J. Maas readers got a little bit more out of this because they could see things being interconnected, where I just missed that entirely. And maybe that would be better. I don't know. So anyway, I'm getting tired of holding this gigantic book up and complaining about it, but it let me down. I was so excited to read it and I just didn't love it. And honestly, I'll probably pick up the third one. So it's not that I didn't love it so much that I'm just done. I am still interested. I just hope that all of that stuff was for a reason. And maybe she can really land the plane in the third book and just tie up everything. I would love that. I'm hopeful for that, but we'll see. We'll see. So that's the first book that took me like half the month, which is probably why I don't have very many books to share with you this month, but I have some other good ones. So I have this book. So I read this book. I read an Agatha Christie this month because I was helping host a weekend readathon called Weekend with Agatha. Me and Chantel from Chantel Reads All Day did that, and it was just so much fun. And I was able to read this book over a weekend, and I just enjoyed myself. So I will link the vlog where I read this book if you want a few more tidbits on my thoughts on it, but I won't spend too much time since I did kind of make a whole vlog about it. So this book is called The Mysterious Affairs at Styles. It's the first Agatha Christie book where she brings in Hercule Poirot, one of her main detectives in her series, and there are a number of books with him in it. So I really wanted to like try out the first one. I wanted to see how she brought his character in, and I really enjoyed it. So this book is about a family who lives kind of in this big mansion in the countryside, and someone is found dead, and they're not sure who did it or if it was an accident or things like that. And then Poirot was brought in because there was a man staying at the estate, and his name was Captain Arthur Hastings, and he knew Poirot, and he knew Poirot was in town, and so he called him up and said, will you help us like understand what's going on with this death? It was very sudden, it was a little bit violent. Was it an accident? Was there foul play involved? And then he goes through the motions of like collecting all the evidence, and I am finding that I really just love how Agatha Christie does that, how it's just a very straightforward mystery, and the whole time I'm really invested in trying to figure out who did it. I did not figure it out in this book, but I was still highly entertained. So I read this one and I gave it, I think, 4.5 stars. So good. Loved it. So that was the second book I read this month. As for the third book, so the next 2 books are 5-star books. I loved them. So I talked a bit about this in my last Friday Reads video, because this one took me a while to read. It was like in a number of my Friday Reads videos, but when I finished it, I finished like the second half in like a day. It was so good. So what is it about? So this is a contemporary book, which I don't normally read, but I highly enjoyed it. I got the recommendation from Emily from Novelle Novels. I'll link her down below again. And I just really enjoyed it. So it's about this girl named Leah who is 12 years old at the beginning, and it tells her story of how her parents were foster parents. So growing up in her house was just this revolving door of foster siblings, which was hard for her at times. But then there was this season where there was this boy named George who was brought into their house who was the same age as her. And she became friends with him, and she got to know him, as well as this other boy from like kind of down the road who grew up in this rich house but was not very loved. And they just formed this tight friendship, the 3 of them, when they were like 12 or 13 years old. And then the story goes from there, where it starts to hop back and forth in time to a time when they're a little bit older, and you see how life plays out for them. and it follows Leah as like hard things have happened, but yet George comes back into her life and things like that. It is just very heartwarming, and it is so full of emotion that you just feel for her. And I in particular just really connected with her because her later time story has like, she's a mother of a small child, and there's just some hard stuff there, and I just really liked it. So if you're a fan of like contemporary books or family dramas, or especially like found family kind of elements in your book, this is such a good one. So I highly recommend this. And sorry I didn't say it. It's called Someone I Used to Know by Paige Toon. So good. As to the last book I finished last night, and you guys, I loved this book. I loved it so much. I'm just so excited. I picked it up kind of on a whim, and that's Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. So I've been curious about this whole book series. I've been curious about her writing for some time because these are fairly popular books, especially on the fantasy booktuber channels that I follow. And I've just been intrigued by the fact that she's often described as a very character-driven author. So she makes you really feel for her characters, as well as the fact that there's plot, but it's more about the characters and their development, which I completely agree. And honestly, if you are a historical fiction reader, I feel like the writing in here reminds me a bit of Amor Towles, his writing style, where it is really focused on the characters and walking their life with them as everything happens. And there's definitely a plot in there, but the plot is more secondary to the characters. So this book is so good. It is about a boy named Fitz. And at the beginning of the story, he is 6 years old, and he is dropped off at the castle, and he is the bastard son of the king in waiting. And basically he's dropped off and been like, here, you take him. We can't raise him anymore. He's yours. And that really starts the ball rolling for him. And so he gets dropped in with like the stable master. Like, his father doesn't really want anything to do with him. So he is kind of shunted to the side, and he's raised a bit by the stable master, and he's taught different things. And then he also kind of gains the eye of the king, and then the king decides that he maybe wants to use him as a royal assassin. So he starts training him up in that and other trainings and things like that. And there are definitely a plot line which buttons up by the end of this. It doesn't button up everything by any means, but there is some things that were resolved by the end of this book. But I feel like what struck me more from this book was a lot more of the things that happened to Fitz. Like, as you're watching this boy who has no family, nobody to love him, just like attached to different people, and then get hurt and let down, and then attached to different people and get hurt, and then learn he can't attach. And you're just rooting for him to like do well, for him to overcome all of these obstacles, because it's not just like he doesn't have family, but it's also that like he is shunned, like he is this like political pawn that nobody wants him there, but yet he can't be discarded because he has royal blood in him. But it's very complicated. His presence complicated things, and all those sour feelings have made things hard on him, and it just goes from there. So this book follows him from he's like 6 to 16 ish or something like that. And then there's 2 more books in this trilogy, which this one's called the Farseer trilogy. And then I think there's a number of other sets of books in this whole world, but I am really liking the Fitz character, and I'm liking how the end wrapped up. It was intense there at the end, and I was just like, oh, I'm all for it. I feel like Robin Hobb doesn't pull punches. Like, she like beats up her characters, but yet you still are like, okay, you can do it. You can get through this. You can come back from this thing. And it's just, yeah, she hooks you and then she beats you up is kind of how it feels. But I loved it. And like I already said, I feel like you're a historical fiction lover. You would like this because it also focuses on that kind of, feels like a medieval kingdom. I mean, there is magic at play, but it's pretty light. It's more about his life than the magic or the world. And there's no like world building. It feels like medieval England, in all honesty. So good. I'm actually kind of bummed I didn't just buy the whole trilogy when I picked this one up from Book Depository, because I like these covers better. They're the UK covers. I should have just picked up all of them, but I try not to do that, because what if I don't like the series, but now I love it, so now I have to make another order. But that's okay. That'll be fine. So anyway, I highly recommend this. Even if you're not a fantasy reader, this is a book that doesn't feel too fantasy. Oh, it's just so good. I'll stop talking. I will stop talking about it. So anyway, those are the books I read for March. It was kind of a smaller stack, but some really impactful books. I mean, one really disappointing book, but a lot of really good ones, and I'm so happy I picked those up. Anyway, that is what I have. I hope you all enjoyed your reading in March as well and are looking forward to April. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you want to. Otherwise, guys, I will see you in the next round of book videos. All right, take care. Bye.